I stood frozen at the head of the Christmas table, 25 faces staring at me, and felt my son's words land like a punch to the chest. Pay the rent or leave, Mother. The crystal chandelier above us, the one I'd chosen myself 15 years ago, caught the light just so, casting diamonds across his angry face. I didn't cry. I didn't shout back. I simply set down my wine glass, the base clicking against the marble I'd imported from Carrara, and said 7 words that would change everything. Matteo, we need to talk. Alone. His wife's laugh died in her throat. The room went silent except for the soft hum of the heating system, that expensive radiant floor warming everyone's feet. My son had no idea what was coming. Neither did I, really. But something inside me, something that had been bending for years, finally snapped. This is the story of how I lost my son to find him again, how I had to destroy his world to save his soul, and how the hardest gift a mother can give is the truth. If you're new here, please subscribe. This channel is just beginning, and we're sharing a new story every single day. Stories that matter. Stories about people like us. I'm Sonia Vega. I'm 64 years old, and for the last 30 years, I've built something most people only dream about, an empire. Not the kind you read about in magazines with glossy photos and celebrity endorsements. The real kind. The kind built on knowing which neighborhoods in Mexico City would rise before anyone else did, on walking construction sites in the rain, on signing contracts at midnight because that's when the deal was closing. Vega Propiedades, my company, my name, my life's work. But here's the thing nobody knew, not even my own son. Matteo thought he was taking care of me. He thought the penthouse in Polanco where I lived, the one with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chapultepec Park, was his. He thought he paid for my car, my clothes, my groceries. He thought I was his dependent mother, living off his generosity as a successful architect. And I let him think it. For years, I let him think it. Why? Because I wanted him to feel capable, strong. Because after his father died, I saw how lost Matteo became. And I thought if he believed he was the man of the family, the provider, it would give him purpose. I thought I was protecting him. I was wrong. So terribly, painfully wrong. But I didn't know that yet. Not on that Christmas evening when everything I'd built, not the buildings, but the carefully constructed lie I'd been living, was about to collapse. Let me take you back to the beginning of that day. To understand what happened that night, you need to understand what led up to it. You need to see the life I'd created, the delicate balance I'd been maintaining, and how fragile it all really was. That Christmas morning started before dawn. I woke up in my bedroom, the master suite with its view of the park, the custom closets, the bathroom with marble from the same quarry as the dining table, and lay there for a moment, watching the first light creep across the ceiling. The city was still quiet, that rare moment when Mexico City holds its breath before the chaos begins. I could hear the distant sound of church bells, smell the faint scent of pine from the tree Matteo had put up in the living room the week before. He'd been irritable while decorating it, I remembered, snapping at Valentina when she tried to rearrange the ornaments. "It's fine," he'd said, his jaw tight. "It's fine the way it is." But nothing was fine. I'd seen it for months now, the way stress was eating at him. The way he'd check his phone obsessively, that little crease forming between his eyebrows when he looked at his bank account. The way Valentina had started making little comments about budgeting and being more strategic with their spending. I'd wanted to tell him then. Wanted to sit him down and explain that he didn't have to carry this weight, that I'd been carrying it all along. But every time I came close, I'd remember the way his face had lit up that first time I'd let him help me with rent, how proud he'd looked, how needed he'd felt. So I'd stayed quiet, and the lie had grown, month by month, year by year, until it had become this massive thing between us. This wall I didn't know how to tear down without destroying him in the process. I got up and started cooking. That's what I do when I'm anxious. I cook. My mother taught me that. When your hands are busy, she used to say, your mind can't spiral. So I made tamales, dozens of them. The pork ones Matteo loved, with the sauce that took 3 hours to get right. The chicken ones with green salsa. The sweet ones with pineapple and raisins for the children. I stood in that kitchen, the kitchen I'd designed myself, with the 6-burner Viking range and the marble countertops and the custom cabinets, and worked the masa with my hands, feeling the texture change as I added the broth, little by little, until it was perfect. The corn smell filled the apartment, warm and homey, and for a few hours, I could pretend everything was normal, that this was just another Christmas, that my son wasn't drowning in debt trying to support a life I was actually paying for, that his wife wasn't a woman who valued his perceived success more than she valued him, that the truth wasn't a bomb waiting to go off. Mateo arrived around noon. He came in through the private elevator, the one that opened directly into the penthouse, the one that required a key only 3 people had. He looked tired, more than tired, exhausted. There were shadows under his eyes, and he'd lost weight. His suit hung a little loose on him. "Mama," he said, kissing my cheek. His skin was cold from outside. Everything looks perfect, but his eyes didn't light up the way they used to. He looked around the apartment with this strange expression, something between pride and resentment, like he was looking at something beautiful that was costing him too much. "Where's Valentina?" I asked. "Finishing a video. She'll be here soon." He said it flatly, without emotion, and I knew they'd been fighting. I wanted to ask, wanted to pull him into the kitchen and make him coffee and let him talk the way he used to when he was young, when he'd tell me everything. But we'd lost that somewhere along the way, lost it in the lie, in the distance it had created. So instead, I just said, "Good. I made your favorite tamales." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You always do." The other guests started arriving around 1. My brother Carlos with his wife and their 3 kids. My cousin Elena with her new boyfriend. Friends from the neighborhood. People I'd known for years. The apartment filled with noise and laughter, with the sound of children running and adults catching up, and the clink of glasses as I served ponche, that warm Christmas punch with teyocote and cinnamon that tastes like childhood. Valentina arrived at 2, an hour late, her phone already out and recording. She was wearing a designer dress, one I recognized because I'd seen her post about it last month, tagged with Jan Gifted, which meant some brand had sent it to her for free in exchange for promotion. She had 150,000 followers on Instagram. Her whole life was curated content, and my son somehow had become part of that content, a prop in her aesthetic. "Sonia," she said, air kissing both my cheeks, careful not to smudge her makeup. "This is so gorgeous, so authentic. My followers are going to die." She swept her phone across the room in a slow pan, capturing the decorations, the food, the family, capturing my life like it was a museum exhibit. Mateo watched her with that same flat expression. Then he went to the bar and poured himself a whiskey. At 2 in the afternoon. That should have been my first warning. Dinner started at 4, as the sun began its descent, and the light through those floor-to-ceiling windows turned gold. We all gathered around the table, the custom table I'd had made from a single piece of perotta wood, big enough to seat 30 people. I'd bought it years ago, imagining moments exactly like this. Family gathered, generations together, love and food and connection. I sat at the head of the table, and Mateo sat at the foot, and for a while, it was everything I'd hoped it would be. Carlos told his ridiculous stories about getting lost in Guadalajara. Elena's boyfriend nervously tried to make conversation with everyone. The children argued over who got the biggest tamal. Valentina took photos of her plate from 17 different angles before taking a single bite. And I watched my son drink his second whiskey, then his third, and felt dread building in my stomach like a stone. The phone call came during dessert. Valentina's phone, buzzing on the table next to her plate of flan. She picked it up without excusing herself, without even lowering her voice. "Hello? Oh, hey!" She laughed. Too loud. "No, we can't do Cabo this year. Mateo's being weird about money." The table went quiet. Just a little. Just enough for people to glance at each other with that uncomfortable look people get when they're witnessing something private that's become public. Mateo's face went red. "Valentina?" he said quietly. She held up one finger. "Wait," and kept talking. "I know, right? We went last year and it was amazing. But now suddenly we're on this budget and I'm like, what's even the point of working so hard if we can't enjoy it?" "Valentina," Mateo said again, louder. She finally looked at him irritated. "What?" "I'm talking to Sophia." "Hang up." "Are you serious right now?" "Hang up." She rolled her eyes but said goodbye and put the phone down. "What's your problem?" "My problem," Mateo said, and his voice had this edge to it I'd never heard before, "is that you're discussing our private finances with your friends at Christmas dinner. It's not private. Everyone knows we're struggling. We're not struggling. Really? Because you won't even upgrade the car. This Cadillac is from 2019, Mateo. Do you know how that looks? The stone in my stomach grew heavier. I tried to catch Mateo's eye, tried to signal him that we could talk about this later, privately, but he wasn't looking at me. He was staring at Valentina with something close to hatred. How it looks, he repeated. That's what you care about? How it looks. Yes, I have a brand to maintain. I have followers who expect a certain lifestyle. I have deals that depend on what? On pretending we're richer than we are? On staging a life that's barely real? She stood up, her chair scraping loud against the floor. At least I contribute something. At least I'm bringing in money with my content. What are you bringing in? Because from where I'm sitting, we're living in this amazing penthouse. But you act like we're broke. You won't go out anymore. You won't travel. You won't even take me to decent restaurants. What's the point of this life if we're going to live like we're poor? And that's when Mateo exploded. You want to know why? He shouted. And everyone was staring now, all pretense of privacy gone. You want to know why I'm being weird about money? Because I'm supporting 3 people on 1 salary. He swung his arm wide, gesturing around the table. 3 people, Valentina. You, me, and my mother. The room went completely silent. Even the children stopped talking. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Mateo, I said quietly, we can talk about this. But he wasn't listening. He was on his feet now, months or maybe years of frustration pouring out of him. No, we can't keep pretending. We can't keep acting like this is sustainable. Mama, I love you. You know I love you. But this isn't working. His voice cracked. I can't do this anymore. I can't support everyone. I can't be responsible for everyone's happiness and everyone's life, and he stopped, took a breath. I watched him pull himself together, watched him force his face into something calmer, more rational, more cruel. Here's what's going to happen, he said, looking at me now, really looking at me. After the holidays, you either start paying rent, market rate like any other tenant, or you need to find somewhere else to live. The chandelier hummed. That's what I remember most. The soft electrical hum of the chandelier, the one I'd imported from Milan, the one that had cost more than most people make in a year. Someone's fork clinked against porcelain. Valentina was nodding, emboldened now. It's not personal, Sonia. It's just reality. It's just being practical about resources. Carlos started to stand up. Mateo, you need to... But Mateo cut him off. I need to what, Tio? Keep pretending I can afford this? Keep drowning? I'm trying to run a business. I'm trying to build a career. And I'm doing it with one hand tied behind my back because I'm supporting 3 people. Something has to change. He looked at me, and there was pain in his eyes. Yes, but also something harder. Something that looked like resentment. I'm sorry, Mama. I know it sounds harsh, but you have savings. You can find a smaller place. I can what? I heard myself say. My voice sounded strange, distant. I can what, exactly, Mateo? You can figure it out. The way everyone else has to figure it out. I can't carry this anymore. I can't. And that's when something inside me, not broke, because breaking implies it was weak. This was more like cracking, like stones splitting along a fault line that had been there all along, invisible until the pressure got too great. I stood up slowly. My legs felt unsteady, but I made myself stand straight, made myself look at my son, at this man I'd raised, at this person I'd protected so much that I'd accidentally made him into someone who could humiliate me in front of our entire family. Mateo, I said. My voice came out quiet but steady. Come with me. Now. He blinked, surprised by my tone. Mama, there's nothing to... Now. I didn't wait to see if he'd follow. I walked through the dining room, past the living room with its view of the park, past the Christmas tree with its carefully arranged ornaments, to his study, the study I'd set up for him when he'd moved in after college, the one I'd furnished with the best books on architecture, with the custom desk made from reclaimed wood from an old hacienda in Oaxaca, with the leather chair that had cost more than some people's cars. He followed me, and I could feel his irritation rolling off him in waves, mixing with embarrassment and defensiveness and anger. Look, he started as soon as the door closed. I know it sounds harsh, but you have to understand my position. I'm 34 years old and I'm still supporting my mother. That's not normal. That's not... I opened the filing cabinet. The one in the corner. The one that looked like just another piece of furniture, but that held all the documents I'd kept hidden for years. "What are you doing?" he asked. I didn't answer. I pulled out a folder. The first one. The one I'd been afraid to show him for so long. "What's this?" "Open it," I said. My voice still steady, still quiet. My hands weren't shaking. I'd thought they would be, but they weren't. He opened the folder. I watched his face as his eyes moved across the first page. Watched the confusion settle in. Watched it turn to disbelief. The deed to the penthouse. Owner, Sonia Maria Vega. Date of purchase, August 15th, 2010. He looked up at me. I handed him another folder. The registration for the Cadillac. Owner, Sonia Maria Vega. Date of purchase, June 3rd, 2019. Another folder. The credit card statements. Sonia Maria Vega, primary account holder. Mateo Vega, authorized user. Another. The utilities. All in my name. Another. The property tax statements. Another. The insurance. His hands started shaking. The folders trembled, and papers slipped out onto the desk. "Mama, what is this? I don't understand. This doesn't make sense." "It makes perfect sense," I said. "You don't take care of me, Mateo. I take care of you. I own this apartment. I own the car. I pay for everything. Every single thing. The electricity, the water, the internet, the housekeeper you think you hired, the meal service, the parking space, all of it. All mine." He sank into the chair, that expensive leather chair, still staring at the papers spread out in front of him. "But you told me—" "I never told you anything," I said. "You assumed. After your father died, you wanted to help. You wanted to be the man of the family. And I let you believe you were helping. I let you transfer money to me every month. And then I put that money into a savings account in your name. I let you think you were paying rent when I was the landlord. I let you think you were supporting me when I was supporting you." His face was white now, completely drained of color. "Why?" "Because I thought it would help you," I said, and I could hear my voice starting to crack now, the steadiness beginning to fracture. "After your father died, you were so lost, so broken. You didn't know who you were or what you were supposed to do. And when you got your first real job, when you wanted to help with expenses, I saw how much it meant to you, how much you needed to feel useful. Needed. So I let you believe it. I thought it would give you confidence, purpose. I thought I was being a good mother." The word mother came out bitter. "Instead, I created this." I gestured at the papers. At him. At everything. "I created a man who thinks he has the right to humiliate his mother in front of the family. Who thinks he's earned the authority to tell me to pay rent or leave. Who's so arrogant, so blind that he can't see what's right in front of him." Mateo's eyes were filling with tears. "Mama, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I'm sorry. Sorry isn't enough," I said. The words came out harder than I'd intended. Sharper, but I couldn't stop them. "Sorry doesn't erase what you said out there. Sorry doesn't undo the humiliation. You treated me like a burden, Mateo. Like some charity case. Like I was the problem in your life." I pulled out one more folder. The biggest one. "Do you know what this is?" He shook his head, still crying now, tears running down his face. "This is Vega Propiedades, the company I built, the company I've run for 30 years. I'm not just the owner, Mateo. I'm the president, the CEO. I hold 68% of the shares. The other 32% is divided among investors. But I have controlling interest. Me, Sonia Maria Vega. I built this from nothing after your father died. I took the insurance money and the small apartment we owned and I turned it into an empire. 47 properties across Mexico City, 112 employees, annual revenue in the hundreds of millions. I watched him process this, watched his whole understanding of reality shift and crack and reform. "You thought you were supporting me," I said quietly. "But Mateo, I could buy and sell you 100 times over. I could buy this entire building if I wanted to. I could buy Valentina's entire influencer career with what I make in a month. And you had the audacity to tell me to pay rent. In my own home." The silence that followed was profound, complete. I could hear him breathing, fast and shallow. Could hear voices from the dining room, muffled through the door. Could hear my own heartbeat, loud in my ears. "Mama," he finally said. His voice was small, broken. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I would never have said those things if I'd known. Please, you have to believe me. I do believe you, I said. That's what makes it worse. You didn't know because you never asked. You never wondered how I was really doing. You never questioned the story you told yourself about being the provider. You just accepted it because it made you feel good about yourself, because it fit the narrative you wanted. I walked to the window. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky orange and purple. The city was lighting up, a million lights against the gathering dark. I'm leaving tonight, I said. He stood up fast, stumbling. What? No. Mama, please, we can figure this out. I'm leaving, I repeated. I'm going to pack a bag and go stay somewhere else. And when I do, some things are going to change. What things? I turned to look at him. The lease on this apartment expires January 15th. I won't be renewing it. His face went even whiter, if that was possible. The Cadillac is registered as company property. It'll be picked up this week. Mama, the credit card in your name is linked to my account. It's being canceled. Please, the housekeeper, the meal service, everything else I've been paying for quietly, behind the scenes, making sure you could maintain this lifestyle you thought you'd earned. All of it stops now. My voice was shaking now, but I kept going. You want me to be a tenant? Fine. Then you can be a landlord, a real one who actually owns the property, one who actually pays for it. But I can't afford— I know, I said. I know you can't. That's the point, Mateo. You can't afford this life. You never could. And instead of being honest about that, instead of building something real, something sustainable, you've been living in a fantasy I created. And I'm done. I'm done enabling it. I'm done protecting you from reality. He was crying hard now, his whole body shaking. Mama, please, don't do this. I'm begging you. I'll apologize to everyone. I'll tell them I was wrong. You'll what? You'll perform remorse? You'll put on a show? That's not what I want, Mateo. I don't want you to apologize. I want you to understand. I want you to actually learn what it costs to live, what it means to earn something. And you can't learn that if I keep catching you every time you fall. I walked to the door, stopped with my hand on the handle. I love you, I said without turning around. I've always loved you, but love isn't the same as protection, and I've been confusing the two for far too long. Mama, wait. But I didn't wait. I walked out, past the dining room where everyone had scattered into awkward groups, avoiding eye contact, past Valentina, who was on her phone, probably texting her friends about the drama, past my brother, who started to reach for me but stopped when he saw my face. I went to my room and packed a bag, one suitcase, clothes for a week, my medications, the photo of my husband I kept on my nightstand, the drawing my granddaughter, Carlos's youngest, had made for me last Christmas. I didn't pack much. I didn't need much. When I came out, Mateo was standing in the living room, surrounded by our family, but completely alone. Where are you going? He asked. Somewhere that's actually mine, I said. Somewhere I don't have to pretend. Somewhere I can just breathe. I walked to the elevator, pressed the button. The doors opened. Mama, he called out one more time. I turned and looked at him, really looked at him, at this man I'd raised, this person I loved more than my own life, this son who'd broken something between us that might never fully heal. Goodbye, Mateo, I said, and then the doors closed, and I was gone. I went to Coyoacan, to a small apartment I'd bought years ago as an investment and never thought I'd need. It was a studio, really. One room with a kitchenette and a bathroom. The walls were white and bare. The bed was just a mattress on a simple frame. There was a small table with 2 chairs, a window overlooking a street where jacaranda trees would bloom in spring. Nothing like the penthouse, nothing like the life I'd been living. It was perfect. I spent that first night sitting by the window, watching people pass below, a couple holding hands, a man walking his dog, a woman carrying groceries. Normal people living normal lives. And I felt this strange sense of peace, like I'd been holding my breath for years and could finally exhale. My phone rang 17 times that night. Mateo, every time. I didn't answer. He left voicemails that progressed from angry to confused to desperate. Mama, please call me back. I don't understand what's happening. Please, I'm sorry. Just tell me what I can do. I listened to each one, then deleted them. Not out of cruelty, out of necessity. Because if I answered, if I gave in, nothing would change. He needed to sit with this, needed to understand what he'd done, what he'd said, what he'd assumed, and I needed to remember who I was without him. The next morning, I made a pot of coffee in that small kitchenette and called my lawyer. "Javier," I said when he answered, "I need you to do something for me." "Sonia, it's 7 a.m. Is everything okay?" "No," I said, "but it will be. I need you to send a non-renewal notice for the penthouse in Polanco. The lease expires January 15th. Don't renew it." There was a long pause. "Sonia, that's where your son lives." "I know exactly where my son lives. Send the notice." "Are you sure? Because once this goes out, there's a 30-day window. And if you change your mind—" "I won't change my mind," I said. "Send it certified mail. Today." Another pause. Then, quietly, "What happened?" "I'm teaching my son a lesson that I should have taught him years ago," I said. "That's all." I hung up and made another call. "Maria," I said to my CFO, the woman who'd been with me since the beginning, who knew almost everything about my business and quite a bit about my life. "Good morning. I need you to do something." "Of course. What is it?" "The Cadillac registered under the Polanco address. Company vehicle. I want it picked up this week." "The Cadillac?" I could hear the confusion in her voice. "But isn't that—" "It's a company asset. We're reassigning it." Silence. Then, "Sonia, are you all right?" "I'm better than I've been in years," I said, and I realized it was true. "Just handle it, please." "Of course. Anything else?" "Yes. Cancel the corporate credit card under Mateo Vega's name." "Sonia, it's my account. He's an authorized user. I'm revoking that authorization. I have to say, as your CFO and your friend, this seems necessary," I finished. "It's necessary, Maria. Trust me." 3 more calls. The housekeeper I'd been paying for years, giving her a generous severance and a reference letter. The meal delivery service, canceling the subscription. The private parking space in the building's garage, reallocating it. Every support beam I'd quietly, invisibly placed under my son's life, I pulled away. Every cushion I'd put between him and reality, I removed. By noon, it was done. The life Mateo thought he'd built was going to collapse, and I was going to let it. Not because I wanted him to suffer, though part of me, the part that still felt the sting of Christmas dinner, the humiliation in front of everyone I loved, did want that. I was going to let it collapse because it was built on lies, and nothing built on lies can stand. I spent the rest of that week in my small apartment in Coyoacán, working from my laptop, taking meetings by video call, running my company from a folding table while sitting on a simple wooden chair, and it felt more real than anything I'd done in years. Mateo called constantly, 40 times that first week. I didn't answer. He showed up at my office. My assistant turned him away. He sent texts that went from angry to confused, to desperate to angry again. "What are you doing? This is insane. We need to talk. Mama, please. I got a notice about the apartment. You can't be serious. They're taking the car tomorrow. How am I supposed to get to work? My credit card was declined. This is humiliating. Answer your phone." I read every message, felt each one land like a stone in water, sending out ripples, but I didn't respond. Not yet. Because responding would be giving him an escape route, and he needed to walk through this, needed to feel it. My brother Carlos called too. "Sonia, what's going on?" Mateo called me. "He's falling apart." "Good," I said. "He needs to fall apart. He needs to see what's underneath all the things I was holding up for him. But he's your son, which is exactly why I'm doing this," I said. "Because I love him enough to let him fail. That doesn't make any sense." "It will," I said. "Give it time." By the 2nd week of January, I heard through my assistant, who heard from Maria, that Mateo and Valentina were fighting constantly, that Valentina had found out the penthouse was in my name, that the car was being repossessed, that Mateo's credit card actually belonged to me, that the life she thought she'd married into was a mirage. The fights were loud enough that neighbors complained. By the 3rd week, I heard they were moving, not to another luxury building in Polanco or Condesa, or any of the neighborhoods where influencers lived their carefully curated lives, to Nezahualcóyotl, Neza, as locals call it, a working-class neighborhood east of the city, the kind of place where the apartment buildings are concrete and crowded, where the streets flood when it rains, where people work 2 jobs to make rent. The kind of place Mateo had never even visited, let alone imagined living in. Good, I thought. Let him see how most people live. Let him see what it's like when you don't have a safety net you didn't even know was there. By February, Valentina left him. I heard about it from Carlos, who'd stayed in touch with Mateo despite my instructions not to tell him where I was. She moved out 3 days ago, Carlos said. Packed up her clothes and her ring light and left. Moved in with some photographer in Condesa, someone with money. Of course she did, I said. Was she ever going to stay? Mateo thought she loved him. Mateo thought a lot of things that weren't true, I said. That's the problem. I asked Carlos not to tell me more after that, because hearing about Mateo's pain hurt me more than I'd expected. Because even though I knew this was necessary, even though I knew he needed to learn this lesson, I was still his mother. And mothers don't stop hurting for their children, just because the children deserve the pain. But I held firm. I didn't reach out, didn't send money, didn't offer to fix anything. I let him fall, and I waited to see if he'd learn to catch himself. The weeks turned into months. Winter faded into spring, and the jacarandas bloomed, turning the streets of Coyoacan purple with fallen flowers. I walked to work some days, just because I could, just because the small apartment was close to one of our offices. I worked harder than I had in years, throwing myself into new projects, new developments. I had dinner with Maria and laughed for the first time in months. I called old friends I'd lost touch with. I read books. I slept through the night. I discovered that I'd been living in tension for so long. The tension of maintaining the lie, of managing Mateo's ego, of pretending to be less than I was, that I'd forgotten what it felt like to just exist, to just be Sonia, without the roles, without the performance. It was April when Maria called me into her office with a strange look on her face. "What is it?" I asked. "We got a proposal through the Community Development RFP," she said. "The one for the Iztapalapa social housing project." I nodded. We'd put out a request for proposals 3 months ago, looking for architects who could design affordable housing that was actually dignified. Most of what we'd received was garbage, cheap solutions that treated poor people like they didn't deserve beauty, didn't deserve light, didn't deserve space to breathe. "This one's different," Maria said, sliding a folder across her desk. "It's really good, Sonia. It's exactly what we've been looking for." I opened the folder. The proposal was comprehensive. 50 units of affordable housing in Iztapalapa, designed for families making between 2 and 4 minimum wages. The architectural drawings were beautiful, simple but elegant, the kind of design that respects the people who will live there instead of treating them like problems to warehouse. Natural light, cross-ventilation, shared green spaces, community rooms. Commercial units on the ground floor to create economic opportunity. Modular construction to keep costs down, but quality materials. Durable, built to last. "These aren't temporary shelters," I murmured, flipping through the drawings. "These are homes, real homes." "I know," Maria said. "That's what I thought too." I kept reading. The proposal included interviews with families in Iztapalapa, community input, local needs assessment. Whoever designed this hadn't just drawn pretty pictures. They'd listened. They'd cared. I flipped to the last page to see the architect's signature, and stopped. Mateo Vega. The world tilted. I sat down slowly, still holding the proposal. "He doesn't know you're the president," Maria said gently. "He submitted this blind, through the normal channels. He has no idea it's going to cross your desk." I stared at my son's signature, at his name. "Where is he working now?" I asked. My voice sounded strange, distant. "A small firm in Neza. They do community projects, low-income housing, schools, community centers. He's been there since March. Since March. 2 months after Valentina left. 2 months of living in Neza, of seeing how most people live, of working on projects that mattered instead of projects that showed off." "The proposal is really good, Sonia," Maria said again. "It's exactly what this project needs. But, obviously, this is your decision. If you don't want to move forward with it because of... Schedule a meeting," I said. "What?" "Schedule a meeting with the architect. Tell him his proposal made the shortlist. Tell him we want to discuss it further. But don't tell him I'll be there. If you've made it this far, please subscribe to our channel and leave a like. It really matters to us. It shows YouTube that this content is important to you, and it helps us keep sharing these stories. Thank you. The meeting was set for a Tuesday morning in our main conference room, the one on the 15th floor with windows overlooking Paseo de la Reforma. I arrived early, dressed in my formal suit, the navy one I wore for important presentations, with my hair pulled back, not as Mama, as Señora Vega, president of Vega Propiedades. Maria was there, 2 board members, my development director. We had coffee in good cups, the proposal printed and bound, the room set up formally, professional. When Mateo walked in at exactly 9 o'clock, he didn't see me at first. He was looking at his phone, turning it off, slipping it into his pocket. He was thinner than he'd been at Christmas. His suit was cheaper, off the rack instead of tailored, a little shiny at the elbows. But he stood differently, less swagger, more groundedness, less performance, more substance. Then he looked up and saw me at the head of the table. He stopped in the doorway, completely froze. Mama? The word came out strangled. Señor Vega, I said, my voice professional, businesslike. Please sit. We're here to discuss your proposal for the Iztapalapa development. He stood there, mouth open, trying to process what he was seeing. You're the president? I've always been the president, I said, as you would know if you'd ever asked. Please sit down. We don't have all morning. He sat slowly, carefully, like he was afraid the chair might collapse under him. He put his portfolio on the table with shaking hands. The other board members watched with interest. They knew I had a son. Few knew we'd been estranged. None knew the full story. Talk me through your proposal, I said. He swallowed, looked at me, then at the others, then at the bound document in front of him. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but steady. The proposal is for 50 units of housing in Iztapalapa, targeting families making between 2 and 4 minimum wages. These are people who work, construction workers, cleaners, drivers, street vendors, but who can't afford market-rate housing in most of the city. They end up in overcrowded apartments, or illegal settlements, or places that are barely habitable. They deserve better. He opened his portfolio, showing renderings, floor plans. The design prioritizes natural ventilation to reduce electricity costs, large windows for natural light, shared green spaces for community building, commercial units on the ground floor, laundromats, small shops, cafes, to create economic opportunity and foot traffic. We're using modular construction to keep costs down, but the materials are durable. Concrete, not wood that'll rot. Proper waterproofing, insulation. These aren't temporary shelters. They're homes meant to last 30, 40 years. I watched him talk, watched his hands move over the drawings, watched his face light up when he described the community rooms, the playgrounds, the shared gardens. This wasn't a performance. This wasn't my son trying to impress clients with his vision. This was someone who cared, who'd seen something that needed fixing and wanted to fix it. Why Iztapalapa? I asked. Why not somewhere easier? Somewhere with better infrastructure, better access? He looked at me directly. Because it's forgotten. Because people there work just as hard as anyone in Polanco or Condesa, but they come home to places that don't have windows that close properly, or water pressure that works, or safe streets for their kids to play in. They deserve the same dignity, the same quality of life, as anyone else. Just because they make less money doesn't mean they should live in places that make them feel less human. The room was quiet. And what makes you qualified to design for them? I asked. It was a harsh question, and I saw him flinch, but he held my gaze. Because for the last 4 months, I've been living in Neza. Because I've learned what it means to hear your neighbors through the walls, to worry about the electricity bill, to take the metro every day in the crush of people just trying to survive, to wonder if you can afford to fix your shoes, or if you need to walk on cardboard for another month. His voice got stronger. I'm not saying I understand everything. I'm not saying 4 months makes me an expert on poverty, but I understand more than I did. And more importantly, I'm listening. This design didn't come from my ego. It came from conversations with families who live in Iztapalapa, who told me what they need, what they dream of, what would make their lives better. I'm just the person translating their needs into buildings. I looked at him for a long moment. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the air conditioning, the distant sound of traffic from Reforma below. The board will review all proposals and make a decision by end of week, I said finally. Thank you for your time, Señor Vega. He stood, gathering his portfolio with hands that still trembled slightly. At the door, he turned back. Mama, he started. Señora Vega, I corrected. In this building, it's Señora Vega. We maintain professional boundaries here. He nodded, something like pain crossing his face. Señora Vega, he said carefully, thank you for the opportunity. And I'm sorry for everything. I know that doesn't change anything. I know sorry isn't enough. But I need you to know that I understand now. I understand what I didn't see, what I wouldn't let myself see. I didn't respond, just held his gaze until he looked away and left. When the door closed behind him, Maria let out a long breath. Well, she said, that was intense. What did you think of the proposal? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. The development director spoke up. It's good, really good. It's exactly what we asked for. Practical, affordable, dignified. The community input is thorough. The cost projections are realistic. If we're serious about this project, this is the kind of design we need. The board members nodded in agreement. Sonia, Maria said gently, this is your call. If you don't want to work with him, schedule him for the next phase, I said. But I want oversight. If we do this, if we hire his firm, I want to see every step, every decision, every compromise. I want to know if this is real or if it's just another performance. And if it's a performance? Maria asked. Then we find another architect, I said. But if it's real? I paused. If it's real, then maybe my son has finally learned something worth knowing. We approved the project 2 weeks later. Mateo's firm got the contract, and he was named lead architect. But I didn't make it easy. I attended every site meeting, every design review, every contractor negotiation. I questioned every decision, every material choice, every cost-cutting measure. When he proposed using cheaper fixtures in the bathrooms to save money, I shut it down. These families deserve the same quality you'd want in your own home, I said. When he suggested reducing the size of the community room to add another unit, I said no. Community space isn't a luxury. It's essential. These people need a place to gather, to celebrate, to support each other. Don't take that away to add another line to your profits. He took every note, made every change, never argued, just listened and improved. And slowly, over weeks and then months of early mornings and late nights, of walking the construction site together in hard hats and dust, I watched my son transform. He learned the names of every construction worker, not just the foreman, but every person laying brick, pouring concrete, installing windows. He brought coffee for the crew on cold mornings. He asked about their families. When one worker's daughter got sick, Mateo helped him find a clinic that would see her for free. He sat with families from the neighborhood and adjusted designs based on their input. A mother said the kitchens were too small for the way her family cooks, so he made them bigger. An older man said the hallways were too dark, so he added windows. A young woman said there was nowhere safe for kids to play, so he redesigned the courtyard with playground equipment and good sightlines from the apartments. When a supplier tried to swap in cheaper materials, thinner glass, lower-grade concrete, Mateo caught it and refused to sign off, even though it meant delays. My mother taught me, I heard him say once to the contractor, not knowing I was standing around the corner, that what you build says who you are. And I'm not going to build something I'd be ashamed of. These people deserve my best work. They deserve everyone's best work. I had to walk away before he saw me crying. The project moved forward through summer and into fall. I watched Mateo arrive at the site every morning at 6:30, before anyone else. Watched him stay until dark, checking details, fixing problems, making sure everything was right. He never complained, never cut corners, never treated this like it was less important than the luxury projects he used to work on. One evening in late September, I found him sitting on a pile of lumber, looking at the half-finished buildings as the sun set. He didn't hear me approach. They're beautiful, I said. He turned, startled, then smiled. A real smile, not the performative one I'd gotten used to over the years. They're getting there, he said. Another 4 months, maybe 5, and families will be moving in. You've done good work here, I said. It wasn't easy to say, but it was true. Thank you, he said quietly. Then, Mama, can I ask you something? What? Why did you do it? Why did you let me believe all those things for so long? I sat down on the lumber next to him. Around us, the site was quiet. The workers gone for the day. Just the sound of wind through the unfinished buildings, the distant noise of the city. I thought I was protecting you, I said. After your father died, you were so lost, so broken. And when you wanted to help, when you wanted to be the provider, I saw how much it meant to you, how much you needed it. So I let you believe you were taking care of me, even though it was the other way around. I thought I was giving you purpose, confidence. But you weren't, he said. It wasn't a question. No, I was giving you arrogance. I was teaching you that you could have things you hadn't earned, that you could live a life you couldn't actually afford. And worst of all, I was teaching you that you were better than you were, that you'd accomplished more than you had. I was stealing your chance to really grow. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Mateo said, I'm glad you stopped. I looked at him, surprised. You're glad? Not at the time, he said with a dry laugh. At the time I was furious, humiliated, lost. But yes, I'm glad. Because the person I was at Christmas, the person who could say those things to you in front of everyone, I hated him. I didn't even know I hated him until everything fell apart and I had to look at who I really was. Without the penthouse, without the car, without Valentina and her followers and the whole performance of success. Just me. And I didn't like what I saw. And now? I asked. Now I'm building something real, he said. Something that matters. I'm not trying to impress anyone. I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just trying to make places where people can live with dignity. That's enough. That's more than enough. I felt tears on my face and didn't try to hide them. I'm proud of you, I said. The person you're becoming. Not the person you were. The person you are now. He reached over and took my hand. I'm sorry for what I said at Christmas. I'm sorry for how I treated you. For how blind I was. For how arrogant. I can't take it back. And I know it hurt you. But I need you to know that I understand now. I understand what you gave me. What you tried to teach me. And I'm grateful. You're welcome, I said. And meant it. By October, my health started failing. Nothing dramatic at first. Just exhaustion that wouldn't lift no matter how much I slept. Shortness of breath when I climbed stairs. A tightness in my chest that my doctor said was probably stress, but let's run some tests just to be sure. The test came back with words like cardiac event risk, and hypertension, and you need to slow down. I didn't tell Mateo, didn't tell anyone except Maria, who started blocking out my afternoon meetings and insisting I leave the office by 5. You're not 25 anymore, she said. You can't run on coffee and stubbornness forever. I've been doing fine so far, I said. You're 65 years old, and you almost destroyed yourself to teach your son a lesson. That's not fine. That's martyrdom. Stop it. But I couldn't slow down. There was too much to do. Too many projects. Too many decisions that needed my attention. And if I slowed down, if I stopped moving, I'd have to sit with everything I'd been avoiding. The loneliness. The fear that I'd broken something with Mateo that could never be fully repaired. The question of what I'd do when I couldn't work anymore, and work was all I had. Then one evening in mid-November, Mateo showed up at my office. I was at my desk, reviewing contracts, and I didn't hear him come in. Mama, he said, and I looked up, startled. It had been months since he'd called me that in the office. Months since he'd broken the professional boundary I'd insisted on. You look tired, he said, concern clear in his voice. I'm fine, I said automatically. You're not fine. Maria told me you've been leaving early. You never leave early. I glared at the door, even though Maria had gone home hours ago. Maria needs to learn discretion. Mama, please. He sat across from me, and in the dim light of my desk lamp, I saw real worry in his eyes. Not performative concern. Real fear. Talk to me. What's going on? And maybe it was the exhaustion, or the medication, or just the fact that I was tired of carrying everything alone. But I told him. About the doctor's appointments, the prescriptions, the warning to reduce stress, to delegate more, to consider retirement. About lying awake at night, wondering if I'd have another year, or 5 years, or 10 years, and whether any of it would be worth anything if I spent it alone. He listened without interrupting, his face getting paler with every word. When I finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'm sorry. For what? For everything. For Christmas. For the way I treated you. for being so blind and arrogant that I couldn't see what you'd built, what you'd sacrificed, what you'd given me. For taking and never once asking what you needed. His voice cracked. I'm sorry, Mama, for all of it. I reached across the desk and took his hand. His palm was rough now, calloused from construction work, from finally doing something real instead of just drawing pretty pictures. I'm sorry too, I said, for lying to you all those years, for letting you believe a version of reality that wasn't true. I thought I was helping. I thought I was being a good mother, but I was just stealing your chance to grow up. You were trying to protect me, he said. Protection and growth don't always go together, I said. Sometimes love means letting people struggle, letting them fail, letting them find out who they really are when nobody's holding them up. We sat there in the quiet office, holding hands across the desk, and something between us healed. Not all the way. Some wounds take years, not months, not ever fully closing, but enough to breathe. Enough to start again. The Iztapalapa project finished in late March, exactly on schedule. 50 families moved into homes with big windows that actually opened, with doors that locked properly, with kitchens big enough for family meals and bedrooms with closets and bathrooms with water pressure. Real homes, dignified homes. At the opening ceremony, hundreds of people showed up. Families who'd be moving in, community leaders, local officials, press. The sun was bright, and someone had hung papel picado across the courtyard, the colorful paper banners fluttering in the breeze. I stood in the crowd, wearing sunglasses so nobody could see if I cried, and watched Mateo give a speech. He was nervous. I could tell by the way he kept shifting his weight, the way his hands gripped the microphone too tightly, but his voice was steady. This project, he said, isn't about me. It's not about the architecture firm I work for or the company that funded it. It's about the families who will live here, who deserve to live in places that treat them with dignity and respect, who work just as hard as anyone else in this city but haven't had access to housing that reflects that. He paused, looked out at the crowd. I want to thank the construction workers who built this place, who showed up every day and did excellent work because they understood how important it is. I want to thank the families who shared their stories with me, who told me what they needed, who made sure this design was for them, and not just for my portfolio. Another pause. Then he looked right at me. And I want to thank the person who taught me that buildings aren't about ego. They're about people. My mother, Sonia Vega, who built Vega Propiedades on the principle that everyone deserves a home, not just the people who can afford luxury, who believed in this project when others thought it wouldn't work, who pushed me to be better, to do better, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. This project is her legacy as much as it is mine. People applauded. I felt Maria squeeze my arm, felt tears running down my face behind my sunglasses. A little girl with a ribbon in her hair ran up to me and handed me a drawing she'd made. A house with a big sun and flowers, and a woman standing in front of it. That's you, she said, pointing to the woman. My mama says you gave us a home. I folded the drawing carefully and put it in my purse. Your mama gave you a home, I said, my voice shaking. She worked for it. I just helped build it. The girl smiled and ran back to her mother, and I knew I'd keep that drawing forever. That night, Mateo came to my apartment in Coyoacan. I'd moved back to Polanco months ago. The penthouse still sat empty, and Maria had finally convinced me it was foolish to let it sit vacant. But I'd kept this small place, this space that reminded me who I was when everything got stripped away. When the performance ended, and all that was left was Sonia. Just Sonia. We sat on the small balcony overlooking the street, drinking coffee and listening to the sounds of the neighborhood settling in for the night. Somewhere a dog barked. Somewhere a couple argued. Somewhere children laughed. Life, real life. I'm working on something new, Mateo said. Another housing project? 3 more, he said. Different neighborhoods, different scales, but all the same principle. Affordable housing that treats people like they matter. And I want to pitch them to you, not as your son, as an architect who believes in what Vega Propiedades can do, who wants to partner with a company that has the resources and the vision to make this kind of work sustainable. I smiled. Send me the proposals, but know that I'm a tough client. I know, he said, smiling back. That's why they'll be good, because you won't let me cut corners. You won't let me compromise. You'll push me to do my best work. Damn right I will. I said. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the street. Then Mateo said quietly, "Do you think Dad would be proud?" I thought about my husband, gone 15 years now, the man who'd believed in hard work and honesty, and doing right even when it cost you, who'd built our first small real estate portfolio with his own hands, working construction during the day and studying property law at night, who'd died too young, too suddenly, leaving me with a grieving son and a small business and no idea how to move forward. I think he'd be proud of who you've become, I said. Not who you were at Christmas, not the person who thought he'd earned things he hadn't, but the person you are now, the person who works for things, who cares about things, who's building things that matter. I'm still becoming, Mateo said. I'm not finished. I don't think I'll ever be finished. That's the point, I said. That's what your father understood. That's what I've learned. We're always becoming, always learning. The moment you think you're finished, the moment you think you know everything, that's when you stop growing. That's when you become the person I had to walk away from. I'm glad you walked away, he said. Even though it hurt, even though it broke me for a while, I'm glad, because it forced me to build myself back up, to figure out who I really was, who I wanted to be. Me too, I said, and I meant it. Today, 3 years after that terrible Christmas dinner, Vega Propiedades has completed 8 social housing projects across Mexico City and 2 more in Guadalajara. 647 families have homes because of work Mateo leads. Real homes, dignified homes, places where people can raise their children and cook their meals and sleep safely and dream about the future. Mateo remarried 2 years ago, to Ana, a social worker he met at a community meeting in Iztapalapa. She's smart and kind, and she doesn't have an Instagram account. She sees him for who he really is, not who he was pretending to be. They live in a modest apartment in Roma Norte. Nothing fancy, nothing performative, just a home they can actually afford. I'm 67 now, officially retired, though I still come into the office twice a week to consult, which really means to make sure Mateo isn't letting standards slip. My health is better. The medications work. The stress is less because I'm not carrying secrets anymore, not maintaining lies, not pretending to be less than I am so my son can feel bigger. My heart, both the literal one and the metaphorical one, is stronger. I learned something through all of this, something I wish I'd understood decades ago. Love isn't the same as protection. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone fall, so they can learn to catch themselves, so they can learn they're strong enough to stand on their own. And Mateo learned something too. He told me once, late at night after a particularly hard day when a contractor had tried to cut corners and he'd had to fight to maintain quality. I thought being a man meant providing for people, having the money, having the power, having everyone depend on you. Now I know it means serving them. There's a difference. Providing is about your ego. Serving is about their needs. I was providing. Now I'm serving, and it feels better. Harder, but better. The penthouse in Polanco sits empty most of the time now. I keep it for family gatherings, for birthdays and holidays and celebrations, for the times when we need space to be together. But I live in Coyoacán, in that small apartment with white walls and big windows. The apartment where I remembered who I was, where I learned that I didn't need luxury to be happy. Just truth, just authenticity, just the freedom to be fully myself. Last Christmas, we had dinner at the penthouse. Just family this time. Carlos and his family, Mateo and Ana, me. Small, intimate, honest. We cooked together. We laughed. We told stories. And when dinner was over and everyone was having coffee, Mateo stood up. "I want to say something," he said. The table went quiet. I felt my heart speed up, nervous about what he might say. 4 years ago, he said, in this room, I said something unforgivable to my mother. I humiliated her. I was arrogant and blind and cruel, and she did something I'll never forget. She walked away. She let me fall. She let me lose everything so I could figure out what actually mattered. He looked at me. I spent months being angry about that, feeling betrayed, but eventually I understood. You weren't punishing me, Mama. You were teaching me. You were loving me enough to let me fail, to let me struggle, to let me become who I was supposed to be instead of who I was pretending to be. His voice got thick. And I want you to know that everything good in my life now, my work, my marriage, my sense of purpose, exists because you loved me enough to tell me the truth, even when it hurt, even when it cost us time together, even when you weren't sure I'd ever understand. He raised his glass. To Mama, to Sonia Vega, the strongest person I know. Thank you for not giving up on me, even when I gave up on myself. Everyone raised their glasses. I couldn't speak, could barely see through my tears. Carlos gave a toast. Anna gave one. My niece gave one. And then we just sat there, together, in that beautiful room with the chandelier catching the light, and I felt complete. Not because everything was perfect, but because everything was real. The greatest inheritance you can leave isn't property or money or buildings with your name on them. It's character. It's integrity. It's the kind of person your children become when you're not watching, when you're not smoothing the path, when they have to walk it themselves and find out what they're made of. I gave Mateo luxury. I gave him comfort. I gave him a life he didn't earn. And when I took it away, I gave him something more valuable, the chance to earn it himself, the chance to build something real, something that mattered, something he could be proud of, not because it looked good, but because it was good. And in the end, that's what love is. Not protection, not comfort, not making everything easy. Love is believing in someone enough to let them struggle, to let them fail, to let them find their own strength. Years from now, when I'm gone, Mateo won't inherit the penthouse or the company or the empire I built. He'll inherit something better, the knowledge that he's capable, that he's strong, that he can build things that matter and live a life that means something, that he earned his place in the world. And that, I think, is worth more than all the properties in Mexico City combined. The chandelier still catches the light just right, still throws diamonds across the room, but now when I see it, I don't think about what it cost. I think about what it taught us, that everything built on lies eventually falls, that the truth, even when it's painful, is the only foundation that lasts, that you can lose everything and find what matters, that it's never too late to start over, to rebuild, to become who you're supposed to be, and that sometimes the hardest thing a mother can do, and the most important thing, is let go. If this story touched you, I hope you'll share it with someone who needs to hear it, someone who's struggling with a difficult truth, someone who's learning that love sometimes looks like letting go, someone who's trying to figure out who they are when all the props get taken away. These stories matter. They remind us that we're all capable of change, of growth, of becoming better than we were, that it's never too late to tell the truth, never too late to start over, never too late to build something real. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to our channel. We're sharing a new story every day. Stories about transformation and hope and the complicated, messy, beautiful reality of being human. Stories about people like us, like you, like me. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, the foundation has to be true. Whether you're building a house or a life or a relationship, the foundation has to be true. Everything else is just decoration. Everything else can be rebuilt. But the foundation, truth, integrity, honesty, love that's strong enough to let go, that's what lasts. That's what matters. That's what we pass on.